Welcome to the 20th class of Haiti, the most important country in the world. I have to say, I didn't anticipate part one of this particular series of videos about the play The Tragedy of King Christophe by Aimé Césaire. I did not expect it to do very well, but a couple thousand of you have watched it, so I really appreciate it. I don't get to teach literature anymore, unfortunately, just by how the demands of public education have changed at the university level. So I'm happy to get to teach this to you because, oh my God, do I love this play and do I think it's important? And I'm intentionally trying to get people interested by calling it Shakespeare in the Caribbean. But what more could you ask for in a historical tragedy? What did Shakespeare give us that Aimé Césaire does not? An epic backdrop, a great tragic hero, filled with amazing and piercing poetic soliloquies. It's all there. It just all, of course, happens to be about something much more recent than Richard III, and it happens to be about Black people by a Black person. So thank you so much for watching this. This is part two. If you haven't seen part one, you really should go back and watch part one of The Tragedy of King Christophe because I expect you to have watched it. So let's get into the class now without any more ado. Any more Freddy ado? All right, let me just make this full screen. Sorry, I always have trouble. Zoom, something updated automatically, and it meant that I had to re-record this. I'm quite grumpy about it. Students and friends, I am Professor Sky. My name is perhaps known to you. I've undertaken to teach about Haiti. I want curiosity and a thirst for complex understanding to reign in this class. I'm working to help that happen. Unite yourselves, students, and learn with me for the same cause. Why weren't you born in Haiti? That's the question I've been asking my students for reasons which I will get into much later. This is the title of the class, The Tragedy of King Christophe, Acts 2 and 3. I do suggest, why not take notes? This is a monumental piece of literature. It's only 100 pages, right? But it is very dense. If you have read this and you followed along, you will have read a very important piece of world literature, okay? I can promise you that. I can promise you that. If you read this and you follow along with me to help explain the things you don't understand, you can say, when someone asks you, what have you been reading? You can say, I've been reading Aimé Césaire, The Tragedy of King Christophe. All right? It is a great work. Oh, and it's Dessalines Day. So October 17th, when I'm releasing this, that's the day where we celebrate the life and death of Dessalines. Feel free to watch my videos about him before. If you are following along with this class and you bought the book I told you that I would be referencing, it is Laurent Dubois' Haiti, The Aftershocks of History. So you can read pages 89 to 112. I will not give you the questions because, this isn't a real class. So these are the texts I will be using today, mostly this translation, the newer translation by Breslin and Ney, which is better than the one by Mannheim, which is unfortunately the one that you can read for free. So please feel free to find the links that I've included in the description for how to read this excellent play, this excellent translation. And if you want, and you want to read the version in French, because you can read French, it is obviously better in the original French. As a brief reminder of what this whole thing is the concept of negritude. So I'm trying to make sure my students understand that. Again, most of my students are freshmen from Western New York. Okay, this is a pretty advanced concept, but I want them to understand this idea of international Black consciousness, that in the 1930s and throughout the 20th century, there were many thinkers who understood that there was a transnational, meaning not limited to one country, not limited to one language, not limited to one continent, a transnational cultural movement and a Black experience which is not the same as the white experience, which has been dominating culturally, has had cultural hegemony over what is considered to be respectable or interesting and artistic, etc. So this valuing of Black culture, Black existence, this rejection of subjugation is at the heart of this text, which is why somebody who is Martinique is 1,500 miles away from Haiti. That's a long way away. It's still a part of France, right? It's not even, post-colonial, technically speaking. But the stories that are being told, Césaire is using Haiti in the way that many people have as an example of the importance of and how negritude can be expressed, how this particular struggle can be so exemplary for the struggle of so many people whose origins are from Africa. as opposed to from Europe. So that's the larger context of why we're doing this. I want to remind you of the central question of what is a tragic hero. A tragic hero is somebody whose greatest virtue is turned is taken to excess and becomes a flaw, and they fall. Right? That's the importance. A tragedy does not mean something sad. A tragic hero means a great person, a good person, a great person who has an excess of their virtue. So the greatest virtue of Christophe, and I came, I did the thing that good professors do, which is when you want students to understand something, you keep saying it over and over and over again. His greatest virtue was the need to have Haiti and Haitians be taken seriously. This is like the fifth class in a row about Henri Christophe. We talked all about the Citadel and Sans Souci and his dedication to the arts. He knew he had to create something for the Haitians going forward, something the permanent. He had to act with dignity. He had to act with the same kind of airs and hierarchy that existed in Europe. And of course, as we will see in the end of the play, which we have here, this virtue in its excess. That is going to be the downfall of Henri Christophe, as very often the need for Haiti to be taken seriously slides into a desire for himself to be taken seriously, himself to be venerated, himself to be treated almost like a god, or if not a god, like a great father. For my students, I'm going to go over this idea. I went over this, so I'm not going to really spend a lot of time here. Just that the most of the play is around the construction of the citadel, and it is the engineer saying that they need a patrimony. And just for them to understand, I really want my students and you to understand part of what made Christophe such an amazing character and why we don't have. 1 second, let me stop share for. We don't have anything remaining from Toussaint. We don't have anything remaining from Dessalines. And we have these two beautiful buildings that still remain from Henri Christophe. We have these tangible pieces of art and culture which defy the concept that people of African origin are not capable of building with the same level or of making at the same level as people of European origin. These two buildings, despite the circumstances, the terrible circumstances of their creation, defy that reading. They are two of the most important buildings on planet Earth, and they are proof of Christophe's greatest virtue, the desire to be taken seriously. You go to the Eiffel Tower, you go to Buckingham Palace, and you go to the Citadel. That is the patrimony. That is what is being left behind because people who are enslaved don't have land to give. They don't have culture they're able to make, except what is able to sort of slip out. Of course, virtually all popular music is made by descendants of slaves, so is was created by descendants of slaves, of enslaved people. But that's the idea. So that's the importance of the citadel, and that leads us into Act Two. Now, what Césaire does quite often is he compares so Shakespeare would do this too. Shakespeare would have little interludes or little conversations between like pages or between people on the street, shopkeepers, etc. People who were not at the highest level of what was happening in the plays, because the plays are epic, right? They're stories of great men, sometimes women, but mostly great men doing great things in great times, which is why it's important that he includes these little interludes with peasants, the people who Henri is doing all this for, because he's doing this ostensibly or allegedly for the people of Haiti. So it's the peasants. That's the people who he's doing it for. It's not a country of kings, it's a country of people. And so this is a little moment of a rest time for the peasants. And I'm having my students, for their homework, describe the different viewpoints of peasant one and peasant two. And you can see it here. First peasant, you can't say it, have anything wrong with a good dose of bush medicine to revive you. That's talking about rum. Okay. But I say to myself, when we beat the whites back into the sea, that it was to have this land for ourselves, not to toil on the land of others, even if they are black, but to have it for ourselves like a wife. No? First peasant, friend, you don't have to turn rebel. I myself say sometimes that Christophe is too fond of the stick, meaning like the stick to beat people with. Uh, But being too fond of the stick doesn't make a man a bad father and husband. It then goes on to talk about how Pétion is too indulgent. God is good, you must trust in him, to which the second peasant says, I'm sorry. Okay, my battery is low. That's fine. The second peasant says, God is good, but far above us, the trouble is getting the prayer up to him. So, this, I hope you understand. The first peasant is one who is liking the project of Henri, of King Henry, who sees it as a great act, and the second peasant is much more realistic. It's much more just like, we went through this whole revolution just to be forced to work on these damn fields, right? So it's what this whole class has been about, this post-liberation period of trying to figure out how and how much should the people of Haiti be working. The King's Guard shows up here, and this is an important little historical moment that Césaire kind of shoehorns in here. The King's Guard, the Royal Dahomians, named after the empire in West Africa, show up and actually read what is called the Code Henri, the Code Henry, the Henry Code, which he made, and I already described to you 4 classes ago. These laws for the kingdom with some environmental preservation, helps agriculture thrive, offers some benefits to the agriculteurs, which are the people who actually work the land, like these two peasants who are being just being monologued at by the Dahomian, and the fermier, the people who actually get most of the money from the land. Lazy workers could be forced to work, but at the same time, they can't be asked to transport everything, and they are stuck with the space where they are, so they don't have freedom of movement, but they are to be taken care of, some kind of reciprocal relationship. It's kind of like Le Code Noir, but not as nefarious, and it is used to uphold labor laws as opposed to slavery. And they are very different, but as this course will tell you, it is not always easy for the people of Haiti to see the difference between slavery and labor laws. And at the end of this little speech in the Code Henri, it says, liberty cannot exist without labor. And that's the question. Act 2 is sort of showing off the second this scene 2 of Act 2 has these fine ladies discussing current affairs, being shocked that women and children are forced to work. A whole story about how King Christophe sees a lazy worker, or a worker who's just taking a break, who's too tired at the citadel, and he sees him and like spies him through an eyeglass and then picks him out and then kills him because he's that wrapped up in making sure that people work. And again, it's the question. This isn't a question of good and bad. It's a question of good people doing bad things and bad people, right? That's really what it really is. If Christophe thinks the only way to be free is for people to work, then killing people who aren't working, in his mind, is keeping people free. Now, listen, if that's your idea of freedom, you can keep it. But there you go. That's the complexity that Césaire is going at. And then we have this character, Baron Vastey, who in actual life was a poet, but in this play he represents the. Let me just turn this off so it's a little more personal here. In this play, Baron Vastey, in my reading, represents all of the best instincts and aspects of Henri Christophe. He always is able to see through the cruelty, or perhaps the pettiness, or perhaps the selfishness, through to the deeper meaning. He will be there to provide a measured, because Christophe is often angry and yelling and running around, just a blustering, right? Vastey is the one who helps to remind the audience. And in my opinion, there's two voices of Césaire in this play. I think the two voices are Huguenin, the jester, more on him soon, and Vastey, where we're sort of kind of poking fun at Christophe, but really trying to see through the terribleness and sometimes the ridiculousness to the deeper meaning of Christophe's reign, the deeper meaning which can be read in this negritudinal way. Is negritudinal a word? Dear God, that doesn't sound like a word. So Baron Vastey explains the brutality. A charming paradox. In effect, King Christophe would serve liberty by means of servitude. That is what he's doing. Then there's a little intertextual interlude, which, okay, I'm not going to make my students do this, so this is a YouTube exclusive, okay? So intertext is when one piece of art refers to another, okay? So this is the interrelationship between this work and another work, and this happens in this scene, Act 2, Scene 2, where they mention the play, the story Ulrica. And as you see there, the heroine of the novel brought all of Paris to tears. It's the story of a little black girl raised in Europe by a noble white family who suffers for her color and dies of it. And this feels to me like Césaire kind of interjecting, because this play is actually from 1823 and Christophe died in 1820, so it doesn't quite match up, but that doesn't matter, right? Shakespeare's chronology is always off too, right? This doesn't, there's truth and there's truth and there's truth, and this is the deeper truth. But what I love is they have a whole where Isabel sings the story of Ulrica. It's a very beautiful moment if you've ever seen this play performed. I'll include a link to the this performance in French where you see this woman singing the song. It's absolutely beautiful. And we go back to a kind of explanation of who Christophe is and why he's doing what he's doing. I think of Christophe, madame. Do you know why he's working day and night? You know his violent humors, as you say, of this frenzied work. It's so that never again, anywhere in the world, shall there be a young black woman ashamed of her color of her skin, who finds her color an obstacle realizing the wishes of her heart. Always providing, I think, a reasonable justification for the actions of King Christophe. Act 2, Part 3 has Christophe for better and for worse. Okay, for better and for worse. He executes a plantation owner who, quote, acts like the whites, somebody who abuses too much the people who works for him. We see him in a very sympathetic light, like really going after this whole beautiful passage where saying, like, we did not do all of this just to act like the white people. What's interesting is that that's what the second peasant said, right? The second peasant said, we didn't do all this just to be pushed around. I don't care if we're being pushed around by white people or black people. Here we see where the line is drawn for Christophe, which is abusing terribly the people who work for you because you are not a slave driver, you are a fermier, you are a land renter. But he also orders women and children to work to build the citadel, to build this patrimony, this heritage for his people, whether they want it or not. He had his dance teacher killed, which Hugonin, shows like how far he might go, the excesses he might go, killing his dance teacher because he felt like a fool. And he forces the bishop, Brel, the white French bishop, to stay. Tells him he cannot leave even though his mother is sick, cannot go back to France. The need to be taken seriously, this virtue in excess. Killing your dance teacher because he makes you look bad is the excess. Also, I took one dance class in my entire life. It was an African dance class. It was the worst hour of my life. I just looked like such an idiot. Part of me understands how Christophe feels because, man, Act 2, Scene 4 has more of the forcing marriages, kind of a quick scene, sort of played for laughs, but again shown by the excesses of Christophe. Act 2, Scene 5, we have the agent of France arrive. Now, this is a crucial moment. You see him there in his little sash. Again, this is from the French embassy's performance of this play in Haiti. Uh, in my notes, I wrote here on the textbook, in real life, Christophe was offered medals in exchange for giving up Haiti. This is dramatizing that moment. It is not strictly the way it actually happened. How does Christophe respond to the French emissary? Yes, look at me with my cool references like 300, that weird kind of fascist movie from a few years ago. Well, first of all, let's see what happens. First of all, the French emissary comes and says, uh, starts talking about Saint-Domingue, because remember, France would not recognize Haiti for another few years here, right? Another long time here. So Saint-Domingue. So this is an insult. And you can read, and I would even suggest if you haven't, pausing and reading this page. Okay? Really, this is just a beautiful conversation between them. Okay? So this must be a mistake. And he just starts talking to him and he says, "You have to call me sir, sire. You have to call me your majesty." He's insisting. And on one part, you're kind of laughing because who says, like, you have to call me your majesty? But also, this is the dignity that he's been denied, that his people have been denied, and he is demanding for it. This is that larger negritude sense of the play. When you address me, you call me sire, your majesty. There's nothing to prevent you from breaching this question of Saint-Domingue. In short, Mr. Franco de Medina, despite his Spanish name, he is representing France. What you are offering me is a deal made on the backs of my people. This free people would again put on its chains. Our glorious army would lay down its arms to submit to the whip. The trophies they won on the field of battle would adorn their torturer's scaffold, and I, in the antechambers of your king, would wallow in gold-striped livery. In truth, sir, if you were not in a civilized country and protected by diplomatic immunity, he's not, he's not protected by diplomatic immunity. Not enough. Christophe asks Plaisot, who's kind of like his yes man, um, and he says, "Bon voyage, Mr. Franco de Medina." Okay, he has him killed. He has him killed by Plaisot and kicks him in. Okay, so we're starting to see a lot of murders happening. A lot of Christophe murdering people. He has murdered the worker, right? The worker, we just had that discussion. He has murdered the French emissary. The representatives of the people arrive to make complaints to him. The representative of the peasants says, "Your people are tired." There's a representative of sort of the Senate who just speaks in this hilariously complex way. "Equivocally express sentiments to all our fellow citizens. Make the nation shall be recompensed for its long struggle, open itself to the sweet hope." And Christophe just defends himself, talking about being too tired. This is similar to the part in Act One, where he is defending himself to his wife. And again, it is always the concept that liberty must be with work. Do you understand? We must work again and rebuild everything. Everything, land and waters, open the lands, control the areas. Okay, it's not our national river, our father river, the Nile of Haiti, just going on and on. And this is his virtue, which is taken to excess. So I can't draw a rack for you, but I'll just describe it because this is one of the crucial portions. You'll see the heroic translation that's given is that they don't give one. I couldn't even find it when you look it up. So we'll just go with what they describe. The enormous crevasse, like a valley, like a ravine. The endless trough through the mud, specifically on the banks of the Artibonite, which is the river in Haiti. You know the rack of Maropa, packed thick with mud, unending, and the century is rain, a long march through endless rain. Yes, in the rack, we are in the rack of history. I think this is Césaire saying that Haiti is in the rack of history, but also, come on, I think he is also talking about Black people in general. I think he's talking about the 20th century. Okay, and he's talking about Black people, international Blackness in the 20th century. For Black people, getting through it means freedom. And brother, too bad for you if you expect someone to lend you a hand. All right then, do you get me? You don't have the right to be tired. Go, gentlemen, which ties into the same theme from the last act, in which he explained that he asks too much of men, but not too much of Black men. The theory being, the idea being that it's not fair, it is the source of inequality, but that Black men must work harder than all other men to get the same dignity and respect. And he sends everybody packing with shovels. Get to work. Here we have the peasant leaving. Well, between us, that's easy for him to say. Funny idea to go walk in the rack. You walk alongside the rack. Everybody knows that. The rack is a trap. You're better off taking the river. Leave all the muck to the left and the right. Cut through by the river. You have to know the rivers. So this is talking about how this great poetic theme that he pulls up just says, no, you have to get away from the Rak. All right. We then have the fate and the meaning of Archbishop Brel, a figure who is representing sort of the continuity between the white rule and the black rule of Haiti, an archbishop who really existed in history and served in Haiti and was the person who coronated Henri Christophe to become the king of Haiti. Prezo in Act 2, Scene 7. Prezo is like the yes man of the play. He gets his orders. He talks too much, Prezo. He writes too much, but no blood. A good death. In his own bed. He is an old man. Gently. Do it quickly. And earlier you see he says he's an old man and an old comrade of mine. So this is maybe the most important death in this story because this represents killing somebody who he considers to be an ally, but he's killing him because he asked to leave, and this might be a sign of madness, the madness of King Christophe. He's sort of seeing treachery everywhere, and so he is going after it here. Act 2, Scene 7, we have the construction site. We have a little song that is being sung by the people. And I'm going to ask my students, what does it mean that the workers sing? I'll maybe tie that together with the fact that singing, that enslaved people often will sing songs to pass along the days, and so will people on work lines. So that's what it means. And what they're singing is, if the master's not so good, still God is good. Haiti is for the Haitians. Almost a song of revolution against the master, who I think we're supposed to think is King Christophe himself. And the term overseer is used, which I hope you understand. That means that the people who are watching over are not much different than slave drivers. Lightning strikes. The gunpowder goes off. Like months of work is undone by a lightning strike. And Christophe just gives a speech screaming to the sky. And he gets more and more poetic as the play goes on. He gets more and more surrealistic, more and more mystical. We start to see more imagery from the voodoo faith, from African religions start to come in and start to creep in. And we start seeing more of him doing things like yelling at the sky with his sword, actually defying God to try to take him down. Greatest virtue, tragic downfall. That's the interlude. Then we get to Act 3 with a royal gathering, uh, with an old man who just seems so impressed with all of these black people with fine silk jackets. It's going back to this idea that people laughed at the court of King Henri because they were formerly enslaved people who were dressed like fancy lads from Europe, but that's part of the project to be taken seriously. And we start to hear more of these things that are happening. We have Monnier, who is one of his most important generals. In my opinion, the problem presents itself with a certain acuity since Pétion's agents are spreading the news everywhere that he's decided to sell off public lands to certain private parties. This is the thing that the Haitians always want. If you've been following the class, you know they don't want to work on plantations. They want their own land to work on and be left alone. That's what the people actually want. More than patrimony, more than a good GDP, they want to work and be okay and left alone. To which Christophe says, oh, let him sell, let him sell. And who will buy? The generals, the rich, the peasants? If it's the big shots, I pity the people. And if it's the peasants, I pity the country. Okay. So who's going to buy the land? Either it's just going to be the rich or it's going to be the uninformed. All right. This is his vision. This is his justification for how he is going to maintain power and why he needs to maintain power. That if it's sold to the rich people, it'll just become like slavery. If it's sold to the peasants, they won't know how to handle it, and the country will fall apart. The new archbishop shows up. We have this royal gathering. Well, I should really, one second, I should really animate this slide. Okay. Because I feel like I didn't animate it properly. Yes. So the new bishop arrived. Oops. Oopsie dipsy. The new bishop arrives. That means that the old bishop is dead. Oh, yes. What does this line mean? The bishop wants to celebrate the Feast of the Assumption and wants to have it in Le Cap, but Henri is so enraptured by his own power, he says, well, we have to do it somewhere else. The cathedral is wherever you are, and the capital is wherever I am. This represents the way that people of power think that everything has to bend to their reality, to their wishes, to their will. We have the Catholic ritual, the Feast of the Assumption, that celebrates the day when, according to Catholic faith, the Virgin Mary ascended into heaven. That's called the Assumption. Whoa, what happened here? Well, when you look up on Google, ghosts in Shakespeare's plays, this is what pops up. Looks kind of looks kind of like AI. Did I accidentally use AI? I hope not. But anyways, uh these are three of them. And I didn't want to go over to like, I think there's like 11 ghosts in Richard III. But this is what I'm going to ask you, what I'm going to ask my students. What's the function of a ghost in Shakespeare? It's usually to torment the protagonist during their fall, to help precipitate, to help exacerbate the fall, to make it worse, to make it quicker, because the ghost represents the excess of that virtue. The ghost represents something that the protagonist, the tragic hero, did and will regret. So in Hamlet, the ghost of his father appears, compelling him to avenge his murder, the vengeful spirit seeking retribution. Banquo's guest, apparition that appears to Macbeth, invisible only to him. And I think most importantly, the ghost of Caesar to Brutus, how he haunts Brutus. Just the idea of haunting you, your past haunting you, and these excesses happening. So that's, here we are. Maybe it's the spirit of Dessalines, which who Pétion and Christophe conspired to kill. But we have during this religious moment, right? So at the end of the play, there's a whole mixture of Catholicism and voodoo. It all gets mixed up here, which is fitting because that's how a lot of religious faith is in the country. We have this. We have Christophe during this prayer seeing a ghost. He starts threatening an invisible apparition. Saint Toussaint, dead for our sins. Parce que nobis, Saint Dessalines, dead at Red Bridge. Like a god snared in a trap. You'd have said that the black fire of the earth was vomited up through the frightful cleft when he defied his thunder with snares of 5,000 arms. Miser, miser nobis. The ghost of Corneille Brel. So often the ghost might be a conscience, a figure of conscience, a figure of reminder, appears at the back of the church. Orneus concede nos famulos tuos domine mentis e corporis sanitare gorare. And Christophe starts shouting at the priest, Juan de Dios, priest of the Roman Church, what sort of mass is this? Corneille Brel. And he falls. By thunder, who has sent Bakula Baku on me? Here is the fall of Henri Christophe. There's his head. This is the stroke. In August of 1820, Henri Christophe suffered a stroke. If you've been paying attention to this class, if you paid attention 4 classes ago, you will know that fact. 3 classes ago, 2 classes, who cares? He had a stroke in 1820. Now, was it at the Feast of the Assumption on August 15th, which is the date that the Assumption is usually recognized, or always? I don't know. I'm not Catholic. Probably not. He probably just had a stroke, just some random day. But much like Shakespeare, he's taking the opportunity. He looked at the calendar, he thought about what it could be, and what could be more powerful than this moment of him having to confront his ghosts while worshiping a saint going off into heaven and precipitating his own downfall. Because if you don't remember what happened to Christophe, you're going to find out in this play. So I'm not going to spoil it for you. No spoilers. After the stroke, he is speaking with his wife and he learns that he is paralyzed. Somebody who defines himself by action and strength is paralyzed. Here's his response. A fatal outcome, a fatal outcome. What a strange abuse of words. Is there any worse fate than that of man betrayed by the imbecile nature, who yet lives, who outlives his own powers? Steward, I'm not so stupid as to believe what my courtiers tell me. I am not king by the grace of God or by the will of my people, only by the will and grace of my two fists. If you remember, my favorite part of scene one is him saying that I clench our fists. He describes his power as coming from the his fist acting for the people. He understands he wasn't chosen by God. He understands that he wasn't here by providence or fate or anything, but just through his work. He is, for better and for worse, representing the kind of life that he is asking of his subjects, of his people, to keep working, that there's no amount of work that is enough for a free black person in this world. He must keep working and keep working. And so this assault of fate on him is worse to him than death would be. Now, I know that's ableist, right? Because obviously it's much better to be living, even if you are not well. But this is poetically speaking here. Yes, my knees are broken. Envious fortune has struck me down, but know that my soul stands upright, inviolate, sound, just like our citadel. Stricken, yet unshaken, the very image of our citadel is Christophe, so I shall continue. You'll be the limbs that nature took from me. I am the head. I have sworn to found a nation. Is there any among you who will refuse to brace its walls, to support its arches, vaults against hurricanes? I expect it of you. I require it. He is the citadel, and the people is citadel, and he is pushing the people to make the citadel to represent the people themselves to the people in the future. Beautiful. Then we have more scenes with the jester, who takes more. Huguenin, the jester, and the king, who starts singing Dambala's Loa. Actually, I think this is actually Dambala right there. I'm not really quite sure. It's a piece of Haitian art that a colleague of mine gave me. And he sings, "The nation not so good, the nation not so good," kind of like the song that they were singing, if you remember, when building the citadel. My poor Huguenot, nations are never good. That's true. There's no such thing as a good country. That's the whole point. There's never been in the history of civilization a good country. Never, because countries are representatives of power, and power always corrupts. There's good people, and there's good people in countries, but there's no such thing as a good country. And that's why kings shouldn't be too nice either. And this all takes place in Sans Souci, the royal palace. And Act 3, Scene 5 is where everything falls apart. This is his tragic fall. Christophe, unable to move, it gets stabbed in the back by everyone. Generals Romain and Guerrier have gone over to the insurgents. And then Christophe says that Magny is to take command, to which Hugonin responds, if my information is correct, the Senate of Port-au-Prince, which is saying Boyer, who followed Pétion, more on him Monday. It's a gift to Magny. Magny has always loved land, Your Majesty. So even Magny has gone over. So this is the great scene in which you always have to have in some great tragedy of a king, where the king says, "Oh my God, why did everybody leave me? Everything is so terrible. Those shitty bastard, this whole country is a dung heap." Okay. We can do without them. And then he finds out that at Le Cap, people have started to take over and seized hold of the arsenal. The rebels are all over the place. Okay? The rebels are all over the place, even in the Cape. We have another scene of the jester and the king again, where we have a little speech in which we have a little song that's sung by Hugonin, where he talks about le capon, which is a castrated cock. And again, if we're talking about like the beginning of the play with the two chickens who are fighting, the two cocks who are fighting, so that's kind of what Christophe is right now, because he doesn't have his power, he doesn't have his people. Okay. And once again, Christophe gives one of these. Sorry, I need to animate this better. There you go. Christophe gives a speech. And in the speech, he says, The proverb from the Congo, the African proverb, when you know the arrow is not going to miss you, at least throw out your chest that it might strike you right in your heart. Do you hear me? Right in your heart. He's thinking about how to have a noble ending. And we start to enter Act 7 with a total surrealistic, poetic soliloquy. Okay? What a fine king is this, and who will obey him if his own limbs refuse his service? And he's basically losing his mind as he is losing his kingdom. Caught in the entanglements of caught blood, capsized sea spume, somnolent marsh, hoarded honey of my blood, uproar, I call you, call back to me. I once said, flight of fiery bees. I once said, great whinnying horse of my own blood. It's okay if you don't understand that. This is a 200 level class, so I'm not going to expect you to be able to break down this great poetry. Aimé Césaire is great, but he does not always write for clarity. He sometimes writes for beauty. Clarity means clearness. There is a certain value to obscurity, to not understanding, to lack of legibility. This goes back to some themes of negritude, the right to opacity, the right that one has to not be seen through, to not be seen, to not be clear. I understand this little soliloquy by King Christophe, even if it is not very comprehensible. He gives us one final speech to his people. Soldiers, you know what sort we are dealing with? Miserable beggars. They would bring dishonor, negligence, laziness, led by a coxcomb whose sole exploit was to sprawl on the bed of Pétion. He's talking about Boyer here. We have built, they will destroy. Did I say beggars? No, they are worms. What lies in wait for you is flabby, gluttonous army of fly-by-night infantry. They're termites, all of them termites. That's what they are. And of course, termites tear down buildings, right? He has an image of Boyer appearing. The iron rod that he loved to brandish over your heads is at last going to break in his hands. The iron rod that he loved to brandish is going to break in his hands. Remember when he grabbed the power, when he grabbed the rod at the very beginning, when he was coronated, he said, I close our fists on the rod of power. And here it is. He held on to it too strong. And here we have this beautiful last words from Christophe. Africa, help me return. Carry me like an aged child in your arms. Then unclothe me, wash me, strip me of all vestments, strip me bare. When morning comes, one strips the dreams of night, my nobles, nobility, my scepter, my crown, and wash me. Wash me of their disguises, their kisses, my kingdom. The rest I can do alone. He just wants to be back home in Africa, even though, of course, he was born in the Caribbean, but still, we understand spiritually, right? This is tied into the idea that of negritude, of everything coming from Africa and going back to Africa. And the more the play goes, the more spiritual it gets, the more it speaks in flowery ways, and especially more these kind of religious views, religious, mostly voodoo, but other forms of West African religion as well, which of course is the basis of most voodoo anyways. Then we have Baron Samedi, who arrives. Huguenot is in the place of Baron Samedi. I am going to do an entire lecture on the voodoo religion. Baron Samedi is a very important and frankly just popular figure, not just in all religion, the death god of the Haitians. I must apologize for my little delay. You know, I'm the one who arrives at the day's end. I think he's also talking about a tragedy, like a play, like it always has to end with death and his little shabby outfit. And he sings a little song about Ogun Badagri, which is like a warrior spirit. Ogun in certain, I believe, Nigerian faiths is like a god of war, but then in Haiti, it's not the same thing as a god. It's more of a warrior spirit. It's all quite complicated, but what you need to understand is it is a spirit tied into voodoo, tied into West African religions that represents sort of political power and strength and war. He stands still and holds his hat in his hand. That's what Baron Samedi does. A shot rings out in the king's chamber, reverberating farther and farther. Thank you. The king is dead. Bernard Just Hugonnet, Baron Samedi, at your service. So he's died. And at the end, we have two people carrying him in a very symbolic way. Well, Sure, they're carrying his body. He is a king. A king is always heavy. Not just that he heavy, I say he getting heavier. Maybe it's because he more and more king. You have to say he was a big tree. So he kept getting more and more king. I think that's an important point, that he kept getting more and more authoritarian and less in line with the people. It's a matter of fact way of describing the tragedy of Christophe. The tragedy of Christophe is that he just became more and more king as time went on. We then have Vastey, who again, I believe is supposed to represent the perspective of Césaire and anybody who looks on Christophe with a kind historical eye, realistic but kind. These are the final words of the entire play. King, on our shoulders we have carried you here by way of the mountain, at the height of the flood. For your path had a name, thirst of the mountain. And see, you are once more the king who stands, suspending above the abyss your own memorial plaque. You tender-hearted stars, you born from the funeral pyre of the Ethiopian Memnon, birds that scatter the pollen, designed for him his immortal coat of arms. On an azure field, red phoenix crowned with gold. That is the symbol, the iconography of Henri Christophe. And at the end here, we have the citadel itself being Henri Christophe. He is there at the top of the mountain. He represents, that is his plaque. It is always looking over Haiti, Henri Christophe, and everything that he represented. So that's the question. Whoops, I really need to, sorry. Goes back to the question, great or virtuous character, destined for a downfall, suffering or defeat, stems from an excess of his greatest virtue. I think we can see the theme working through all the way from the beginning till the end. Oh yeah, for next class, we're going to finally get to Boyer. Like a month and a half ago, we discussed this meeting in April 1802 where all of these people met. And now they've like been a huge part of our class. Okay, so that is, am I not sharing anymore? No. That is the end of this play. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed teaching it. I think it, at the same time that it's a very complex play with the way that it's written, with the surrealistic poetic soliloquies and the way that it could be taught at a 400 level where you go way more into depth into the religious imagery and where you go way more into depth with the historical parallels and all that. You can also just have it be a pretty simple story about somebody who came up out of a revolution and became a king and became a little bit too draconian in his power and ended up being toppled by the same people he was trying to serve. You know, it can be a very complicated or a very simple story. All right, that's enough. All right, I'll see you next when we get to Boyer. There's the camera.